Hey everybody, welcome back to the Behavior Revolution Scriptures, and we're in the book of Judges right now. We're looking at the downfall, the Canaanization of Yisrael, and that downward spiral of them going into idolatry over and over again. And each and every time Yahusha takes pity on them, feels sorry for them because of their oppression and the great, horrible pressure coming on them, and he raises up a judge or a SHOPHETIM, a deliverer, to come and rescue them. And for the life of that judge, there's peace in the land again, in that particular tribe. And of course, once the judge dies, things go sideways again, because Yisrael will not behave themselves, will not believe that there is only one living Elohim. And belief is really, really important. We're going to talk about belief today, because this whole thing is about belief. If you haven't got no belief, what's it all about? And you can see the varying levels of belief in people because of their behavior, can't you? So let's go into it today. We're talking about Deborah. Deborah is the Shophet lifted up today to help Yisrael. And Deborah is probably the only woman judge that's mentioned in the scriptures. And it's very exciting, guys. So before we talk about Deborah, let's talk about this seed of civil war. Because as we know, after the time of David and Solomon, there is a huge civil war in Israel. And we start seeing the beginnings of that already here in Judges. So let's have a look at it. The seeds of civil war. We now get Yisrael's fourth cycle of the 7 judges. And those cycles we went through, Yisrael was happy, then they went into idolatry, then they were punished, taken to idolatry, then they'd repent, then a judge would deliver them, and then they had peace again, and they'd go down that cycle again. So this is the fourth cycle now in the book of Judges of the 7. And it involves a woman named Deborah. And don't forget that underlying all these cycles of disobedience, punishment of deliverance, Yahusha was convincing Yisrael, through all this, Yahusha was convincing Yisrael that they could not operate without a king. And he went to great lengths to show Yisrael this during the era of the SHOPHETIM. All humans inherently know that we need a leader, a strong leader. The problem is, man has his definition of a king and Yahusha has his, and the two are light years apart. Of course, what Yahusha wanted was for Yisrael to have a king in the model of Joshua, who was a servant both to Yahusha and to the people. But as we'll see at the end of Judges, and as we move into Samuel, that even though they finally recognized their need for a king, they wanted one that operated in the mode of their Gentile neighbors, the outside nations. Why would they want to leave behind the freedoms of the tribal structure that they have for the central government ruled by a king? Why? It was inevitable because of their human nature. So, up to this point in the book of Judges, it is the southern tribes that have been dealt with, and the scene now shifts towards northward in Judges 4. It was Canaanites and others whose kingdoms and nations were located to the north and northeast that created havoc for those particular Israelite tribes. Note that as a result of this southern versus northern picture that is painted for us, it means that when we look at the list of SHOPHETIM in the book of Judges, the order they are presented appearing to be chronologically is likely only partially correct. Certainly some judges in the south were operating at the same time as some judges in the north, because there was an overlap. This is because the various enemies of Yisrael were not acting in concert with one another, but in their own interests, and thus what went on in the north of Canaan had little to do with what went on in the south. But it's interesting that this north-south dynamic is being set up so early. Yisrael, by the time of Deborah, has only been in the land for a century. So they've been in the land for about 100 years, or a little more. Due to the natural terrain of Yisrael, with a ridge of hills at the northern end of Judah that provides a natural boundary between the three main tribes in the south, Judah, Simeon and Benjamin, and the remaining tribes, this fact of geography would have an ongoing effect on Yisrael's politics and economy and prophetic futures. What are we talking about? This ridge, apparently there's a big sort of ridge around here. I'll come back to this map in a minute. We've got the northern tribes and the southern tribes all down here. So, it's interesting that this north-south dynamic is being set up so early because of the terrain. If we get slightly ahead of ourselves for a moment, remember when David and then Solomon ruled over a united nation of Israel? We find, for instance, that King Saul, who preceded David, had at least as big a fight on his hands trying to unite all 12 tribes. The southern Israelite tribes were battling against the northern Israelite tribes. So Saul had a big battle as he did against foreigners, because the Israelite tribes located at the two ends of Canaan tended to separate into two distinct groups and sets of intertribal alliances, and so progressed rather independently. So this was happening of itself, really. Thus, after King Solomon died and there was no clear line of succession to the throne, the country of Israel fell rapidly into civil war, and of course divided along the same general boundary as had always existed for Israel, the rugged hills that separated Judah from Ephraim. Thus, from that time forward, we hear of the two kingdoms, or the two houses of Israel, the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom, or their more official names, Judah in the south and Ephraim, or Israel, in the north. And that's them down there. So we've been looking at this map a lot, haven't we? Particularly when Joshua gave out all the lands. I mean, this one doesn't have all the specific tribal lands in it, but it does have Yisrael, which is Ephraim, because Ephraim pretty much took over this whole land and all the other tribes, and Judah took over Simeon and all those in here. So by the time of the Civil War, there was really only north and south, divided by these mountains here, really, that had been separated from the time of the judges. So it's interesting. This was happening of itself. So it is here in Judges that we see the breeding grounds created for the conditions that would establish and cement this north versus south mindset among the Israelites, which in turn would make it such a challenge for the 12 tribes to ever unite into one sovereign nation under Yahusha. These unintended consequences of divided loyalties and tribal alliances would greatly affect Yisrael's history and play out heavily in the book of Ezekiel. And all of it was established as part of Yahusha's master plan of redemption for a fallen world. Because he will bring the two sticks back into one united olive tree at his return. It speaks about those sort of prophetic things in Ezekiel. We'll get there one day. Yahusha will bring he will bring the two sticks back into one united olive tree at his return and confirm in the most spectacular of ways that all this conflict and talk about land in the Middle East is beyond futile. And he'll prove it when he reveals his new creations from within his bride, the only promised inheritance worth fighting for and discussing. And I seem to be saying that every episode, so we won't go into that anymore. We know where the promised land is now, don't we? So, it ain't here. And this is all interesting, and we see how Yahusha taught them all in it. But it's not there anymore. So let's go into Judges chapter 4 today. And we'll probably do chapter 5 as well. We will, because it's a song. And we've done a song. And my daughter Pina and my son Micah are going to take on the roles. And I've joined them a bit, and we're going to sing the song. Talk it and sing it. But for now, let's go to Deborah. After Ehud's death, the Israelites ignored Yahusha again and behaved wickedly with the pagan nations right in Yahusha's face. So he turned them over to King Jabin of Hazor, a Canaanite king. The commander of King Jabin's army was Sisera, who lived in Hasereth Hagoyim, Harasheth Hagoyim, and who had 900 iron chariots to ruthlessly oppress the Israelites with for 20 years. 20 years in this oppression. And the people of Israel cried out to Yahusha for help. Remember the cycle? He's handed them over because of their idolatry. He hands them over to a pagan king. They're in slavery, they're in bondage, they're being oppressed by this general and his iron chariots. So they cry out to Yahusha for help. So Deborah, the wife of 𝕵𝗓𝗠, was a prophet who was judging Israel at that time. In fact, she would sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites would go to her for guidance, judgment, and to settle serious legal disputes. So after Israel fell away again, Yahusha took pity on these northern tribes and again raised up a judge. Interestingly, it was a female judge, Deborah. Now the Hebrew says she is 𝕭𝗓, which literally translate to woman of prophecy, because Isha is a woman, remember? Ish is man, Isha is woman, so woman of prophecy. This identification as 𝕭𝗓 or 𝕭𝗓𝗠 is rare in the scripture and is attached only to Deborah and 2 other women. So this prophetic woman term is only attached to Deborah and 2 other women, Moses' sister Miriam and an obedient woman named Huldah in the time of the kings. These women were true prophets of Yahusha and were greatly respected by the men. In fact, when we're told that Lapidoth is her husband, that is about the last we'll know of him. All else concerning Deborah's husband is apparently unimportant. So, we now come to yet another of those times when the nice and neat version of who a judge is and what role they perform takes a detour. Because here, Deborah is called a judge, but is never called a rescuer or deliverer. See up here? Never says. It says she's a prophet. It says she's a judge that helps the Israelites for guidance, judgment. Never says that she is a rescuer or a deliverer. However, Barak, who's about to show up in the story, is. So this is different in this story. The Shophet, the judge, is not so much the deliverer, it's more the judicial type. Remember, we stated already that these Shophetim, judges, were not generally people who held court and made judicial rulings. They were more like deliverers. Yet Deborah is. She's an exception because the people came to her from far and wide for the purpose of judgment. And the Hebrew word used is ● which means justice, as in a ruling of law. So it appears that Deborah had 2 roles. She indeed was a judicial judge who decided cases, and she was a prophet who brought messages of Yahusha to whomever Yahusha directed her. Interesting. This was not merely advice or suggestions that were being sought by the people. It was a binding legal ruling that resulted from Deborah's decisions. Each tribe had the equivalent of lower courts that settled smaller matters, but when a member of one tribe had a dispute with a member of another tribe, the matter became more complicated, as clan and tribal loyalty overruled almost all other considerations. So finding a neutral party to arbitrate and judge was never easy. Makes sense? When it was in amongst your own tribes, deal with it yourself. They had their own court system, judicial rulings, but when it was one tribe against another, well, who's going to decide who's right? You've got to find someone neutral. And this is the case here. Deborah was a judge. The matter of Deborah being a prophetess also played a role in her judging, and likely it was this general acknowledgement that she had been anointed by Yahusha as his legitimate prophet that gave her an uncontested position of authority to make legal rulings. So, that's a bit about Deborah. So where are we in the story? Yahusha's raised up Deborah, who is a judge. One day, Deborah sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, who lived in Kadesh, in the land of Naphtali. And she said to him, "This is what Yahuwah, the Elohim of Yisrael, commands you." And she's speaking in the first person from Yahusha, as prophets often did. So, this is what Yahusha commands you. "Call out 10,000 warriors from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun at Mount Tabor, and I will call out Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, along with his chariots and warriors to the Kishon River. And right there you will have victory over him." So she's telling Barak, go out and do it, and have victory. She's the prophet, she's the shophet, the judge, yet he's the one who's going to go out and do the work to be the deliverer. But it sounds like he's a bit dubious, because he goes, "That's cool, Deb, I'll go out and do this, but only if you come with me, you know. So, no problem. I'll join you, but you won't get any honor or credit for this campaign if I go, because everyone will know that Yahuwah's victory over Sisera will be because a woman was saving your ass." And we assume, as Barak must have, that Deborah is referring to herself as the one saving the day. Hold that thought, because another woman's going to come on the scene shortly, and her name is Jael. So remember this here, very important. Remember this prophecy. Yahusha says through Deborah, go out, call out the commander Sisera from Jabin's army, draw him all out, and you will have victory there today. Barak's a bit dubious, so he says, well, you're going to come with me then, just so I know this is legit, this is a real prophecy. And she says, no problem, but if I do go, due to your unbelief, if I do go, you won't get any credit, because a woman's holding your hand, you know. She had to take you there. So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. There's a map there. Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh, and upon arrival, Barak called together the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali, and 10,000 warriors went up with him, and Deborah joined him. Barak responded to Yahusha's call through Deborah by saying that he's a bit skeptical and has some conditions if he's going to accept this assignment. Sounds a bit like Moses, doesn't it? No doubt part of his skepticism is why a very good military commander like Sisera would irrationally put his troops, this is the point, he's skeptical because he's thinking, why would a good military leader like Sisera irrationally put his troops in the vulnerable position of being 1,000 feet below his opponents? So his primary condition is that Deborah accompanies him to the battle arena. We should not interpret this as cowardice, as Barak was anything but a coward. Rather, he wanted to be sure of Yahusha's presence, and Deborah was that assurance. And before we go into the story, because we're talking about prophecy here, let's talk about true or false prophets for a moment. The prophets of the scripture had to be infallible in what they pronounced, with the consequence for error being death. Do you see that today amongst all the ratbags and nutbags and idiots that call themselves prophets? Do you see the consequence of false being death? No, you don't. But it was here. You wouldn't just willy-nilly put your hand up to be a prophet, because if you were wrong, you're dead. While that might seem harsh or barbaric, or superstition gone wild, in fact, it is completely logical. If someone is going to pronounce to another a word from Yahusha, then if it actually is a word from Yahusha, it must happen exactly as pronounced. If it does not happen as prophesied, then whether the source of the incorrect oracle was from that person's own mind or prompted from the evil spiritual source, it most certainly was not from Yahusha. Understand that? So if a prophet says this is going to happen and it doesn't happen, it was either from their own imagination, their own mind, or it was from a demon, from the evil one. So either way, they're false. So therefore we have a false prophet. If this happens, it's a false prophet. And never is a false prophet to be believed. So one test for a person who publicly professes the gift of prophecy is infallibility. One mistake, one pronouncement that does not happen, and that person should realize that they are either not a prophet at all, or they are grossly misusing their position. Being a prophet is a dangerous business when you are a true prophet, and being a false prophet can be fatal physically and spiritually. After all, being called a false prophet in Scripture is one of the worst labels you can have. False prophets. So, I mean, that's a little bit cosmic, isn't it? I mean, we don't go around saying, I'm a prophet and I'm a this and... No, it's just, you just hear Yahusha's voice, say this, do this. We don't need all those labels today. It's just, we can all hear Yahusha's voice and do it. Hear and obey, you know. And if he says, I want you to say this to somebody else, you have the choice whether to be obedient or not. Whether you are a prophet or not, you know. But I just found that interesting back here, that if you were wrong, they killed you. So you really want to be sure that you heard from Yahusha, wouldn't you? So, and we've talked about that in articles not long ago, actually. You've got to say it before the fact, and you've got to wait and watch for it to happen and be and really excited when it does happen, and then bring it up and give Yahusha all the credit for it. After the fact then, but you've got to say it before the fact. So what's happened? Barak's gone out, Deborah's gone with him, and they've gone out and they've called all the armies, the enemy army, out. Now, 𝕭𝕝𝗚 is another character. 𝕭𝕝𝗚 the Kenite, a descendant of Moses' brother-in-law Hobab, had moved away from the other members of his tribe and pitched his tent by the oak trees of Za'anim near Kadesh. And when Commander Sisera was told that Barak had gone up to Mount Tabor, he called for all 900 of his iron chariots and all of his warriors, and they marched from Harosheth Hagoyim to the Kishon River. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Get ready, because Yahuwah our Elohim will give you victory over Sisera today, for he's definitely marching ahead of you." So Yahusha's with you. He's going to give you victory. Do you believe it? Deborah's just saying all this stuff, speaking it. She's a prophet, a prophetess, so we know she's legit. So Barak, and don't forget also that she said that a woman would save the day. So keep your eye out for that too in the story. So Barak led his 10,000 warriors down the slopes of Mount Tabor into battle. And when he attacked, Yahusha threw Commander Sisera and all his chariots and warriors into a panic. Right, this. Yahusha can do that, remember? Remember when Yahusha's fighting for you? He throws your enemy into a panic, into chaos. Then Sisera leaped down from his chariot and escaped on foot. So Barak chased the chariots and the enemy army all the way to Harosheth Hagoyim, killing all of Sisera's warriors, and not a single one was left alive. So the king's army was destroyed completely. But the commander, Sisera, jumped off his horse and ran away and escaped. So all the armies destroyed. Meanwhile, Sisera ran to the tent of Jael. Here's another woman. Sisera ran to the tent of Jael, the wife of 𝕭𝕝𝗚 the Kenite, because 𝕭𝕝𝗚's family was on friendly terms with King Jabin of Hazzor. This is interesting, isn't it? Even though these are the enemy, this is Yisrael's been subjected to and being oppressed by an enemy army, enemy nation, the outside nations. This king 𝕭𝕝𝗚 King Jabin. But this guy, 𝕭𝕝 the Kenite, is on friendly terms with them. So he's done a bit of compromising, I reckon. A bit of blending in just to save himself. So anyway, this guy, 𝕭𝕝 the Kenite, had a wife and her name was 𝗹𝗒. And 𝗹𝗒 went out to meet Sisera. Interesting. Why is a woman going out to meet an enemy commander who her husband was friendly with, obviously? 𝗹𝗒 went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Come into my tent, sir. Come in, don't be afraid." So he went into her tent and she covered him with a blanket. Because remember, he's running for his life. As Sisera entered the tent village, as he entered the tent village, he encountered 𝕭𝕝's wife 𝗹𝗒. And 𝗹𝗒 means mountain goat in Hebrew. Living in tents explains that their lifestyle was as nomads. They lived as the Bedouin. Middle Eastern custom greatly valued hospitality. But for nomads, hospitality was especially paramount. The code of the Bedouin is such that they would give up their own lives to protect a guest, friend or stranger. This was common knowledge, so Sisera knew what he was cunningly doing by coming to 𝕭𝕝's people. He knew he'd be safe there because technically he was a visitor, and the code of the Bedouin, of the nomads, was that they would protect strangers no matter what, protect the guests no matter what. So he ran there on purpose. First, 𝗹𝗒 properly greets Sisera, and then in finest Bedouin tradition offered him more than he asked for. It was obvious to 𝗹𝗒 that he was running for his life, hence the words, "Don't be afraid." The implication being that she and her people would, of course, be a shield for him. He asked to rest. She offered him her own tent and a blanket. And she covered him with the blanket. "Please give me some water," he said. "I'm so thirsty." So she gave him some milk from a leather bag and covered him again. "Stand at the door of the tent," he told her. "If anybody comes and asks if anyone's in here, say no." Then Sisera fell asleep from exhaustion. It's been a folk remedy for all cultures that warm milk is soothing and helps to bring on sleep. In that day, there was no such thing as cold milk. So, exhausted and now drowsy from the warm milk, Sisera asked 𝗹𝗒 to stand guard at the tent entrance. Modesty traditions would dictate that if indeed she had said to a male Israelite soldier that no one was in there, they would have honoured it and not entered. Got that? If anyone came looking and she said there's no one in here, the men wouldn't just rush in anyway because of modesty. There might be people getting dressed in there or whatever. It's a ladies' tent, so soldiers wouldn't storm in there because of the modesty customs traditions. So she stood there. Now, feeling comfortable enough that he is safe, Sisera lays down in 𝗹𝗒's tent and she covers him with a blanket, and immediately he falls asleep. Here we go, check this out. There's your clue here about what's about to happen. Then 𝗹𝗒 quietly crept up to the sleeping Sisera with a hammer in one hand and a tent peg in the other. And she drove the tent peg through his temple, his skull, and into the ground, right through his head and into the ground. And so he died. Bit barbaric, isn't it? We should not doubt 𝗹𝗒's ability to pull off such a grisly murder. It was the duty of the nomadic females to disassemble and erect the tents. 𝗹𝗒 was an expert with a hammer and those sharp, hardened wooden stakes. It would have taken little more than 2 or 3 quick strikes with the heavy hammer to drive the tent peg clean through Sisera's sleeping noggin. Thus, in a most unsuspected way, we find that indeed Deborah's prophecy was fully accurate. Sisera was handed over to Yishmael and defeated by a woman. Just not the woman we all expected, eh? Interesting. So, when Barak, Remember, Barak was sent out by Deborah, and he's the one leading the army. Deborah's giving the words and he's following them and seeing the victory happen. And they've just slaughtered the whole army, and Sisera, the commander's run away and escaped and hiding in Jael's tent. And now she's just murdered him. So when Barak came looking for Sisera, Jael went out to meet him and said, "Come, and I'll show you the man you're looking for." So he followed her into the tent and found Sisera lying there dead, with a tent peg through his temple. "You're welcome," she said. Needless to say, Jael must not have agreed with her husband's pro-Canaanite stance. Remember, her husband was friends with the Canaanites. But she wasn't, obviously. She must not have agreed with her husband's pro-Canaanite stance. When the pursuing Barak came to the village of Hebah, Jael ran out to meet him, directed him to her tent, and presented the skewered corpse. Now the victory was complete, but poor Barak was denied the honor of executing the opposing military commander, as was customary. And this was the result of his doubt when Deborah first presented Yahusha's instructions to him. Remember, she said, "You're not going to get the credit. Sheila's going to get all the credit." And so it would have been a big thing for him to have killed the enemy general commander, and he did not get that credit. So Sisera being handed over to a woman was way more literal than anyone thought. Because in this context, saying Sisera usually is referring to Sisera's army. Like Sisera will be conquered, meaning his army will be conquered. But here it means that Sisera himself will be handed over to a woman. Although likely Barak didn't understand that at the time. And of course, such a thing not only takes esteem away from Barak, but it also is greatly humiliating to Sisera, his army and his nation, that a woman in a completely male-dominated society would be the agent of defeat. So just another illustration and another pattern again of the unlikely heroes, unlikely judges, unlikely deliverers from weird, lowly positions, different walks of life, alternate, like women didn't have women weren't in the armies, women didn't do the conquering, it's a male-dominated society. So it just shows that Yahusha's always doing what he wants to do, always doing something bizarre, So on that day, Yisrael saw Yahusha defeat Jabin, the Canaanite king. And from that time on, Yisrael became stronger and stronger against King Jabin, until they finally destroyed him. And the chapter ends by giving all the esteem to Yahusha, the Elohim of Yisrael, for this resounding victory and deliverance. This battle was a tipping point, and so a people, the northern Israelite tribes, who had known only humiliation and subjugation for many years, now found their courage and turned the tables. In a short time, Jabin, king of Hatzor, was no more, and the threat ended. However, this by no means indicates an overall destruction of the Canaanites, but only those in alliance with Hatzor. So future oppressions and subjugations by various groups of Canaanites were all but assured. So, then we come to the Song of Deborah, but I think we might finish, because it's a musical number that we've put together, I think we might finish the episode with that, because it's kind of a summary and a rejoicing, similar to when Miriam picked up the tambourine after the Red Sea and the Pharaoh was washed away and all his army. It's similar to that. Deborah and Barak start doing a song. So let's push the point home first, and then we'll end the episode with the music. So let's go down past the song and we'll talk about this belief, because remember, it's all about belief. Deborah believed what she was saying. You had to believe it back here, because if you didn't believe or didn't say the right thing, and you'd be a false prophet and you'd be dead. So let's look at this word belief, or some versions say faith. In his in Hebrews 11, he rewards those who seek him. He rewards those who seek him. Let's look at the word belief or faith in the Hebrew understanding. It means established, trustworthiness, truth, firmness, security, moral fidelity, set office, stability, steady, truly, a miracle, a sign, a wonder. And the Nelson's Dictionary defines faith as a belief in or confident attitude towards Yahusha, involving commitment to his will for one's life. Nelson also says belief is to place one's trust in Yahusha's truth. The word belief in Greek is pistis, which means confidence or truth. Trust, confidence or trust. In essence, the words are one and the same. So that gives us a bit of an understanding of what belief is. You know, back in religion we'd say faith. That doesn't really, the word is belief. You believe something, so you do it. And of course, the Hebrew concept of belief is not just holding a thought in your head and going, oh, great, I believe that, I believe that. No, a belief in Hebrew is a doing word. You show your belief by behavior. It's thinking and doing, hearing and doing. You're proving your belief by your actions. It's not just a thought process. The Greek concept of belief or faith is a thought process, and that's what's spread into religion today. But the original Hebrew idea of belief is, it's a doing word, it's a verb. Belief was something you did. You don't just declare that that chair is fit to sit on or that ladder is fit to stand on. You prove it by your belief. You go and sit on it, you go and stand on it, you use it, you hear it, you believe in Yahusha, you behave it accordingly. So let's back this up with some scriptural understanding. In Hebrews 11, without belief, it's impossible to please Yahusha. That's pretty important, isn't it? Without belief, it's impossible to please Yahusha. For without belief, it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to Yahuwah has to believe that he is. You have to believe that he is, that he exists and is the center from which all creation revolves. He just is. He is. You've got to believe that he is. He was, he is, he will be, he's everything. He is. So you have to believe that he is and that he rewards those who genuinely seek him. He rewards those who genuinely seek him. Rewards those who seek him. So, in Romans 1, I'm not ashamed of the message about Yahusha, for it's his power of deliverance. This message, this is the message that the emissaries went out into the world with, to say, look, this guy that you heard about who was strung up on the stake, nailed to the stake, I should do. This guy is alive. He was resurrected and he has the power of deliverance for you. You can be delivered of everything. So that is the message, and it's the same message today. The message that Yahusha, A, Yahusha's alive, and B, you can be delivered. Yeah? So I'm not ashamed of this message about Yahusha, for it's his power of deliverance to everyone who believes. And remember what belief means. Not just, oh, I believe in Yahusha. Yeah, whoop-de-doo, demons believe in him too. They've met him. They've been affected by him. Belief is an obedience. Belief means obedience. You believe it, so you do it. So I'm not ashamed of this message. It's the power of deliverance to everyone who believes. And in it, his perfection is revealed. In it, in the belief. In the belief and through the deliverance, his perfection is revealed from belief to belief. As it is written, the obedient shall live by belief. The pure, the righteous, the obedient, the right shall live by belief. So the links of an unbreakable chain is our belief. The links of an unbreakable chain is our belief. And the formula for deliverance and overcoming this world is locked up in our belief of the message of Yahusha, which produces our perfection, bringing us to maturity. Without belief, it is impossible to please Yahusha. And as we seek him, we exercise our belief in an unbreakable chain of love communication that is fixed eternally. Do you feel like this? Do you feel like this? Because every step we take towards Yahusha should be on his living words of victory. And when he's ready for us to know him, he will reveal himself to us by flooding our being. He will. When he's ready for us to know him, he will reveal himself to us by flooding our being. So brothers and sisters, enter in through your portal of love and seek the wonderment awaiting. Yahusha will never let you down, and on this we can believe. So it's no different. I mean, it is different. I was going to say it's no different to them back here with Deborah and Barak. You know, Deborah heard it and said it, and Barak chose to believe it, but wasn't quite sure, so he wanted Deborah to come with him just to make sure that it was legit, because if she said, no way, I'm not doing it, he'd be like, well, you're not really believing your word, then I won't go either. So he wanted a bit of a, you know, confirmation there. So it's different for us. We have Yahusha living inside us. We really have no excuse not to believe, because he is flooding our vessel. He is flooding our vessel, you know, with as much as we will permit, you know, entering in more and more and more. You'll get more and more and more. Listen and do and be obedient, and don't have filthy, disgusting behavior, because when you have that, not only do you feel like death and you're just being used as a filthy, dirty vessel by demons, but you're not getting closer, you're not being transformed, you're stunting your own growth, you know. Yahusha has a plan for you. You are chosen, you are anointed, and Yahusha is trusting you with his seed, with his reign, with a portal. He's trusting you with these things, like the man who gave out the talents. You know, some invested a little bit, some invested a lot. One guy was scared and buried it in the ground, you know, didn't do anything with it. The talents, the gifts, the seed has to grow so that the transformation comes forth. We've talked a lot about the transformation. So that's enough today, guys. Today was all about belief, and I found that story about Deborah and Barak just fascinating. What about the stake through the head? Barbaric, wasn't it? There were lots of commentaries saying, oh, we don't agree with Jael's move. That's murder, that's wrong, and she shouldn't have been lifted up and heralded. Yahusha doesn't agree with murder, and this and that and this and that. Look at the context though. Look at the time we're living in here. Look at the barbaric, you know. It's the time of the judges. It's pretty barbaric. So you can get caught up in religious nonsense, or you can just see the heart of the message and go, wow, this is how Yahusha fought for them. And when they were disobedient, he sent them into captivity. When they were disobedient, he pretty much left them, you know, and let the enemy overtake them. So do you want to be overtaken by the enemy? Do you want to be overtaken by the dragon? Do you want your vessel dragged around from place to place, used for the purposes of evil? Because if you're not obedient, he will give you over to the delusion. If you don't have a love for the truth, he'll just give you over to the lie. He'll let you have what you want. So that's enough for today. We're going to go into the song, because Deborah sung a song. And I'll hand it over to Micah, who's going to introduce this song here. Love you guys. We recorded this earlier today, so I'll hand it over to the guys here. Love yous.
Although the children of Israel had conquered much of the land, the Canaanites oppressed them, and the general Sisera continued to march forward. No one person had taken it upon themselves to defeat Sisera. For who could? Not just any random citizen.
Who are you calling random?
But could a general? Or a prophet?
Barak,
What is it this time?
you must take 10,000 men to the Kishon River, where you will find Sisera and his army.
Sisera? Have you seen his army? Iron chariots. What do we have compared to that? Okay, we'll go. But only if you come with us.
I'll come along, but know this, the victory will not belong to you. People will say that a woman defeated Sisera. Rise!
Every last one of the Canaanites was destroyed, except one.
I gotta get out of here.
Exhausted, Sisera arrived at a random citizen's tent, looking for help.
I'm not random. I have a stake in this matter.
Ava, I need help.
My husband's not home. What's wrong?
The battle. The Israelites are decimating us. Tell your husband we need his help. It's time for you to choose sides.
Oh, we've chosen sides.
We're just letting him get away?
He won't get away.
I thought you
I
would.
said a woman would finish him. I didn't say it would be me.
Thanks for letting me hide here.
Shh. Just get some sleep.
I just thank you for the milk. If anyone comes to your tent and asks if there's a man here, you must say there is no one.
And so, because of one random citizen... With the incredible act by the amazing Yael, the land was at peace for 40 years, until the Israelites started sinning again, and started the cycle of judges all over again, in Gideon versus the Midianites.
Okay, you start, Micah.
Okay.
So this is the song of Deborah and Barak. You're Deborah and you're Barak, alright? So go for it.
This is a victory song, an anthem of freedom and liberation, because it was written to commemorate a great moment in Yisrael's history. It's also a strong summation of what gets Yahusha's people into trouble and what they must do to be delivered. On that day, Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang this song. Yisrael's leaders took charge, and the people gladly followed. Praise Yahuwah. Listen here, you kings and queens. Yes, pay attention, you mighty rulers. For I sing and make music to Yahuwah, the Elohim of Yisrael. Yes, Yahuwah, when you went from Seir and marched across the fields of Edom, the earth trembled, and the cloudy skies poured down rain. The mountains quaked in the presence of you, Yahuwah, the Elohim of Mount Sinai and Yisrael.
In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, and in the days of Jael, people avoided the main roads, and travelers stayed on the winding paths. There were very few people left in the villages of Yisrael, until I, Deborah, arose as a mother for Yisrael. And when Yisrael chose to follow false deities, war erupted in the city gates. Yet not a shield or spear could be seen among 40,000 warriors in Yisrael. Yes, my heart is with the commanders of Yisrael, with those who volunteer for war. Praise Yahuwah.
Sing to Yahuwah. Make music to his name. Pay attention, O Israel, for my heart beats just for him.
Consider this, you who ride on fine donkeys, you who sit on fancy saddle blankets, and you who walk along the road. Listen to the village musicians gathered at the watering holes. They recount the magnificent victories of Yahuwah and the victories of his villages in Yisrael. Then the people of Yahuwah marched down to the gates, saying, "Wake up, Deborah, wake up, wake up, wake up, and sing a song. Arise, Barak, lead your captives away, son of Abinoam."
Down from Tabor marched the few against the nobles. The people of Yahusha marched down against mighty warriors. They come from Ephraim, a land that once belonged to the Amalekites. They followed you, Benjamin, with your troops. From Akir, the commanders marched down. From Zebulun came those who carry a commander's staff. The princes of Issachar were with Deborah and Barak. They followed Barak, rushing into the valley. But in the tribe of Reuben, there was great indecision.
Sing song of Deborah. She rose as the mother of her tribes. Rise up, Barak, lead your armies. Then blow a shofar in victory.
Why did you sit at home among the sheepfolds to hear the shepherds whistle for their flocks? Yes, the tribe of Reuben wouldn't stand up and get their act together. Gilead remained east of the Jordan. And why the hell did Dan stay home? Asher sat idly by, useless, stunned like stunned mullets at the seashore. Yep, they stayed in their harbors, but Zebulun risked his life, as did Naphtali on the heights of the battlefield. Kings of Canaan came and fought at Taanach near Megiddow's springs, but they carried off no silver and no treasures.
Even the stars fought from the sky, and in their orbits they fought against Sisera. The Kishon River swept them away, that ancient torrent, the Kishon. March on with courage, my being. Then the horses' hooves hammered the ground, galloping, galloping, of Sisera's mighty steed. Let the people of Meroz be cursed, said Yahuwah. Let them be utterly cursed, because they didn't come to help Yahuwah fight against the mighty warriors.
March on with courage. Run your race and overcome. Wield your fruit in the battle. Be transformed to be like Him.
Wow, how favored among women is Jael. What a freaking superwoman. Let her be blessed above all the women who lived in tents. That tyrant Sisera asked for water, and she gave him milk. Yes, she brought him yogurt in a bowl fit for royalty. Then her left hand reached for a tent peg, and her right hand for the hammer, and she struck Sisera, crushing his head, and with a shattering blow, she pierced his temples. He sank, he fell, he lay still at her feet, and where he sank, there he died.
From her window, Sisera's mother looked out, watching for his return, saying, "Why is his chariot taking so long? They must be dividing up the captured plunder, with a woman or two for each man. There will be colorful robes for my son Sisera, and colorful embroidered robes for me." No way, never, for Sisera was wicked. Yahuwah, may all your enemies die like Sisera, but may those who love you rise like the sun in all its power.
Now's the time to listen. Engraft into Yahusha's reign. Feel His love surge within you. Die to this world. Sing to Yahuwah. Make music to His name. Pay attention, O Yisrael. My heart beats for you. Sing to Yahuwah. Sing it out. Make music to His name. Music to His name. Pay attention, O Yisrael. Pay attention. My heart beats for you. It beats for you. Sing to Yahuwah. Loud, sing it loud. Make music His name.
Making music.
Pay attention, O Yisrael.
Yisrael.
My heart beats just for Him. We got a hit, guys. We got a hit.
Then there was peace in the land for 40 years. In this case, after the tremendous victory of Barak over Sisera at the base of Mount Tabor, the tribes of Yisrael had peace for one full generation. But let's be clear that the reason for the generation of peace wasn't so much the present lack of enemies as it was the backtracking of Yisrael from their idolatry and wickedness, and the new determination of these Yisraelite tribes to be obedient to Yahusha. The reference to the 40 years of rest in the land was in this case referring to the northern areas, generally because it was the northern part of Canaan, and the tribes who lived there that are the context of the story of Deborah and Barak.
Sing to Yahuwah, make music to His name. Pay attention, O Yisrael, for my heart beats. Sing song of Deborah, she rose as the mother of her tribes. Rise up, Barak, lead your armies, then blow a shofar. March on with courage, run your race and overcome. Wield your fruits in the battle, be transformed. Now's the time to listen, engraft into Yahusha's reign. Feel His love surge within you, dive to His love. Sing to Yahuwah, make music to His name. Pay attention, O Yisrael, my heart beats. Sing to Yahuwah, make music to His name. Pay attention, O Yisrael, my heart beats. Sing to Yahuwah, make music to His name. Pay attention, O Yisrael, my heart beats. Sing to Yahuwah, make music to His name. Pay attention, O Yisrael, for my heart beats.
Come on, now let's sing.
Sing to
Sing it
Yahuwah,
loud, sing it loud.
make music to His name.
Making music too.
Pay attention, O Yisrael,
Pay attention.
my heart beats.
Beats for you.
Sing to
Sing it
Yahuwah,
loud, sing it out.
make music to His name.
Music to His name.
Pay attention, O Yisrael,
Attention.
my heart
Beats for
beats.
you. It beats for you.
Sing to
Sing it
Yahuwah,
loud, sing it loud.
make music to His
Making
name.
music, making music.
Pay attention, O
Pay
Yisrael,
attention, Yisrael.
my heart beats just for Him.